The NFL is a world filled with what-ifs. There are simply so many variables that can happen to a given team or in a given game, let alone during the entirety of an NFL season. And because of this, there is basically an endless number of possible outcomes. It's pretty insane when you think about it. A couple of bounces here, a missed call there, and everything changes. And all it takes is one little difference, and the legacies of coaches, players, or teams could be vastly different. Like during the 2019 AFC Championship game between the New England Patriots and Kansas City Chiefs. Just when it looked like Kansas City's rising star Patrick Mahomes was ready to unseat the perennial AFC favorites, something absolutely shocking happened on the defensive side of the ball. Kansas City had a 31-24 lead with just a few minutes left in the game, but New England was driving the ball into Kansas City territory. Until on 3rd and 10, Brady was intercepted and it looked like all hope was lost. But then suddenly everyone realized that there was a flag down on the field, and it was revealed that Kansas City defensive end Dee Ford had lined up offside.
Huh? What are you doing?
The play was reversed, Brady took the Pats down and scored, and well, the rest is history. It is crazy to think about, though. If Dee Ford just keeps his head in the game and doesn't line up offside, in all likelihood the Chiefs win the game. And then there's some butterfly effect. What happens to the trajectory of the Brady-Belichick regime in New England? Do the Chiefs beat the Rams, or does LA take it and launch a new dynasty headed by the duo of Goff and McVay? There are countless examples of these split-second plays that end up having massive repercussions for people's NFL legacies. The fallout from a single boneheaded play on the field or a controversial call is insane. Just think about how much differently certain players' entire careers would have played out if only the luck had happened to be on their side that day. This is why it is so challenging to build a Hall of Fame resume as a player or a coach in the NFL. So many things are simply out of your hands, especially for players who, in the blink of an eye, can be shipped out from a winning organization to one of the league's, let's call them, less successful franchises.
What am I doing? What am I doing?
But perhaps what's even more interesting is looking at what would have happened to some of these players who were part of an almost done deal that would have sent them to a more competent organization. How could these almost done deals have changed their legacies, and what would have been the ripple effect around the NFL? Especially for some of the players who had great individual careers but could never quite win the big one. I'm not talking about raw hypotheticals, but actual deals that they were linked to and nearly went through but never quite panned out for one reason or another. And Tony Romo is a prime example of just that. A player who, in fairness to him, did have an excellent NFL career, but because of the reputation he developed, which may not have been entirely his fault, he will never be viewed by NFL historians with rose-colored lenses. It's strange that the media and the public ended up souring on Romo so fast. Usually it's the blue chip prospects that get this kind of hate. You know, like a Reggie Bush type. A player who was taken at the top of his draft class and may have ended up having a solid NFL career, but just never fully lived up to the insane amount of hype he had coming out of college. Tony Romo could not fit this bill any less. For starters, he played his college ball at Eastern Illinois, a Division I AA football school, so not exactly a blue blood program. And it doesn't stop there. While he did have an excellent college career, setting a ton of school records at Eastern Illinois and becoming the first player in school history to win the Walter Payton Award, which is given annually to the top Division I AA player in the country, he didn't even garner enough attention to get an invite to the NFL Combine. Eventually, he was invited to attend as an extra quarterback to throw passes to wide receiver prospects during their drills, but still, he pretty much came out of nowhere. So it's nuts that he got as much flack as he did throughout his career, considering how much success he had and where he came from. Anyway, the reason that Romo even ended up on Dallas's radar was actually because of a fellow Eastern Illinois alum, a guy who before Romo was known as the best quarterback to ever come out of the program, Sean Payton. In 2003, when Payton was still an assistant coach for the Dallas Cowboys under longtime mentor Bill Parcells, he was smitten with Romo as a prospect. In fact, Parcells credits Payton with convincing him to bring in Romo as an undrafted free agent under the 2003 draft. Payton was so sold on Romo that not only did he work feverishly to get Dallas to bring him in for a tryout, but he also helped negotiate the deal, convincing the quarterback to join him in Dallas for less money than Mike Shanahan, another Eastern Illinois alumni, was offering him to play in Denver for. Now here's where it gets interesting and where the hypotheticals start to come into play. Sean Payton and Tony Romo overlapped in Dallas for just 2 years, but they worked together closely because Payton was the passing game coordinator while Tony was backing up a veteran quarterback, Drew Bledsoe. Not only did their professions dictate that the two spend a lot of time together, Payton remained one of the young quarterback's biggest supporters in-house, and the two developed a strong relationship. There was a time where it seemed like the two of them were destined to be the future of the Dallas Cowboys. Both head coach Bill Parcells and starting quarterback Drew Bledsoe were getting up in age for their respective roles, and Payton and Romo were both next in line. But ahead of the 2006 season, Payton got an offer that he just couldn't refuse. Mickey Loomis, the general manager of the New Orleans Saints, called an offer to give Payton his first opportunity as a head coach in the NFL. With Bill Parcells' blessing, he accepted the position. At the time, the Saints were very much a franchise in flux. They were coming off of a horrific 2005 that saw the city of New Orleans decimated by Hurricane Katrina. With many of the team's players displaced, they understandably struggled, going 3-13. Still, a head coaching gig is a head coaching gig, and Payton made the most of it. In 2006, he led the Saints to a 10-6 record, an NFC South title, and a berth in the NFC Championship game, all in his first season there. He did get some help from Drew Brees, who they were able to bring in from San Diego that offseason. But at the same time, Brees did not have the same superstar reputation that he has since built up as a member of the Saints. In fact, many people question the decision to bring him in at all. Similarly, Romo too got his first real opportunity to be a starting quarterback in 2006, thanks to some wildly inconsistent quarterback play from Drew Bledsoe. And he too made the most of it, finishing the season with 2,903 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 95.1. Oh, and the Cowboys clinched just their second playoff berth in the Bill Parcells era. Unfortunately for Romo and the Cowboys, the season ended in disaster when Romo botched a place hold on a game-winning field goal attempt, costing Dallas their divisional round matchup with the Seahawks. It was just another one of those wrong place, wrong time situations that seemed to plague Romo during his career. The starting quarterback almost never doubles as a placeholder in the NFL. Usually it's the backup's duty, but because Romo had started the season as the backup, they opted not to change it mid-season. Hindsight is 20/20, but I bet they want that one back. Anyways, as it turns out, heading into the season, it didn't even look like Tony Romo would be donning a Dallas Cowboys jersey in 2006. Once Sean Payton found out that he was going to be taking over the reins in New Orleans, Payton immediately went to work on bringing Romo into the fold. Payton called up his former boss, Jerry Jones, and offered him a third-round draft pick for the Eastern Illinois product, which at the time would have actually been a pretty decent return on investment for Jones. Tony Romo still hadn't even thrown a pass in the NFL, and when you consider how cheap it was for the Cowboys to acquire him as an undrafted free agent, it seemed like a no-brainer, at least to people outside the organization. Jones was insistent that he would accept nothing less than a second-rounder for his quarterbacking prospect. And well, for once, it seems Jerry was right on the money. Romo would end up playing the rest of his career for the Cowboys, amassing 4 Pro Bowl selections, 1 All-Pro selection, and a career passer rating of 97.1. The quarterback also holds a number of Cowboys team records, including passing touchdowns, passing yards, 300-yard passing games, and 3 passing touchdown games. So yeah, you could say Jones made a good decision in being stingy with his former employee. Romo, on the other hand, well, he might wish that Jones had just shipped him out to the Big Easy. Not only would he have avoided the embarrassment of his divisional round debacle against Seattle, but that very same 2006 season was the last of Bill Parcells' illustrious coaching career. And once Parcells left, Romo ended up married to a procession of uninspiring head coaches in Wade Phillips and then Jason Garrett. Phillips, who had a good career as a defensive coordinator in the NFL, quickly proved not to be cut out as a head coach, particularly when it came to the offensive side of the ball. And Jason Garrett seems more like a puppet for the franchise's aging, control freak of an owner than any sort of offensive genius. So it's not a huge stretch to assume that Romo, who had all the physical talent in the world, just might have taken a couple of big steps forward if he had remained under the tutelage of an offensive guru like Payton. Not only that, but he also would not have ended up being unfairly tagged as not clutch, which started after that Cowboys-Seahawks playoff game. And while you might think that the Saints would have regretted going with Romo over Drew Brees, who has gone on to have a Hall of Fame career in New Orleans, the two quarterbacks had much more similar careers in the NFL than you'd expect. Sure, Brees has the 1 Super Bowl victory, in part thanks to Payton, and he has amassed better counting numbers, but he has also played in a lot more games, and their per-game statistics are actually very similar. Heading into the 2019 season, Brees had a 67.3 completion percentage, 7.6 yards per attempt, 97.7 passer rating, and roughly a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. Tony Romo? He managed to maintain a 65.3 completion percentage, 7.9 yards per attempt, 97.1 passer rating, and you guessed it, a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio during his 13-year career. Not only were their regular season numbers pretty similar, so were their postseason numbers, with Brees posting a passer rating of 100, just 7 points higher than Romo's 93. And Romo spent his entire career playing for a somewhat dysfunctional organization and under head coaches that are a far cry from Sean Payton in terms of developing and implementing a quarterback-friendly offensive strategy. Dallas, on the other hand, would have been screwed if they made this deal, even if they had done it for a second-round pick. The only other legitimate quarterback option on the Cowboys roster was Drew Bledsoe, and his play had become so inconsistent that he ended up retiring the following year. And if they had tried to use that second-round pick on a replacement, they would have not had much better luck. The next few draft classes had mediocre quarterbacking prospects at best, especially later in the draft where the Cowboys would have been picking. We're talking about guys like Kellen Clemens and Drew Stanton as the best-case scenario. And other than Drew Brees, who at the time was deciding between New Orleans and the Miami Dolphins for his next gig, the free agent draft classes during that time were pretty weak too. It was headlined by names like Ryan Fitzpatrick, Jeff Garcia, and Chad Pennington. Were those guys competent pros? Yeah, but none of them are even remotely close to Romo in terms of pure talent or actual NFL accomplishments. And while the non-trade ended up great for the Cowboys, the Saints, and for Brees, it resulted in Tony Romo's NFL career being one of the great what-ifs in NFL history. If he and Payton had paired up in New Orleans, who knows how successful they would have been. But instead, Romo will go down as one of the best quarterbacks to never even play in a Super Bowl. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to click the subscribe button down below. If you liked the video, then like the video, we'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune in to TPS every single day for more cool videos.